But let's start a little bit with what you're currently focusing on. So I'm going to start with Matt. Could you tell us, a little bit about you and what you're focusing on right now?
Yeah, I'm Matt. I'm the VP of Technology at Solana Foundation. We're basically the accelerating, facilitating entity of the Solana ecosystem. And at the technology level, it's pretty broad. It's everything from coordinating across all of the protocol development orgs, of which there are about 15 now, and across 3 different clients. And then all the application stuff. So you may have hopefully heard about Blinks or ZK compression or all these technologies at the application layer that touch the user. So it's really pretty broad. DevRel, data, all that stuff.
Hi, I'm Lisa Loud from Secret Network Foundation, and I came to the crypto industry 7 years ago from big tech. So I think my career has been really bringing the processes of big tech into the wild world of crypto over the past almost decade now. It's crazy. And at Secret Network Foundation, the reason I joined is that I believe blockchain is amazing technology, but it can't go past a certain point unless it has some kind of data protection on chain. Because of the radical transparency, you hit a limit in industry when you want to do things on chain, and now you have open access to what you're doing. So Secret Network does on-chain encryption. We've been doing it since 2020. We're using TEEs, the Trusted Execution Environment of the SGX chip. And that's the most accessible way of doing on-chain encryption today, the most practical way of doing it today. And what we're working on now, which is really exciting, is we're incorporating GPUs with TEEs, which means we have a much wider ability, a much wider footprint, and we can do a lot more with confidential computing on-chain. So that's pretty exciting. Join us at Secret Network, and we actually are just releasing it's not announced yet, it will be announced later, but we just released our Solana path, so that now Solana developers can also build using secret confidential computing. So that's what we're working on today.
Go, Matt.
Hey, I'm Matthew. I lead the Streamr project, and Streamr is a decentralized data streaming network and protocol. And it's built in a decentralized pub-sub architecture, which means that instead of servers, everybody is connected in this peer-to-peer mesh. And we're an infrastructure project for DePIN, a middleware layer. We've been building for about 7 or so years, and this year we are now feature complete, fully decentralized, and production ready.
My name is Ørjan. I contribute to the Graph as an ecosystem manager, and the Graph is an indexing protocol for Web3 data, making protocol data, on-chain data, very easily accessible to everybody, giving developers tools to create powerful APIs to power their dApps. I am also the founder of InfraDAO, a infrastructure DAO that is focused on empowering infrastructure providers all across the globe. So I have a couple of hats on there, and excited to be here.
Amazing. I really like this setup because we have a little bit of everything, right? We have the onboarding, the confidentiality, the streaming, and then finally the graph, the indexing, right? So you can really definitely tell how all of these modules can collaborate together, which is kind of what we're trying to push in IoTeX, right? We saw that in DePIN, we started to fragment a lot the technology, and this created a lot of issues. But it starts like one step behind. So I would like to ask all of you, what do you think it's one of the hardest pain points in DePIN, and how do you think your project is kind of solving it? I think we can start with Ørjan over there. What do you think?
Yeah, so one of the hardest points, I think, is that a lot of projects, they require new infrastructure, and we might not even have the user base to support more infrastructure. What I see that excites me about many DePIN projects is that they utilize existing tools, hardware, resources that people have available, so that it allows for much more powerful and horizontal scaling than many other projects in the sphere. So that's why I think it's, that's right.
Yeah, I think that maybe the meta pain point for all of Web3 is maybe our impatience to reach that mainstream scale. I think DePINs really present a very credible opportunity to reach that scale and to reach those users. So coming from the infrastructure point of view, we really need that application layer to drive the adoption with the users. And yeah, that's sort of like the pain and the solve here. I think that's most important.
I guess the typical pain point in any new technology is how do you get from highly technical implementations to being able to understand it and use it at the end user level. And it was very difficult for banks to adopt cloud computing, for example, because they were used to having their servers on premise, and that felt safe to them. And now, even though we didn't solve any of the problems inherent in cloud computing from a bank's point of view, now banks have adopted those and accepted the risks of doing cloud computing for their servers. Now, taking that and taking it a step further, actually DePIN, I think, offers a better solution than cloud computing for the banking industry. But how comfortable are they going to be in doing that? And so I think that's the pain point, is just like getting us to, like you said, mainstream adoption, but for specific reasons, and that's security and the perception of risk. I would say in our case, the biggest pain point is that cloud computing doesn't offer very many options for trusted execution environments. So if you want to run nodes on our network, it's renting a server that will do that, or renting a CPU that will do that is very expensive. So validation becomes expensive. Running your own hardware is also expensive. So how do we solve those problems with DePIN? That's the question.
Yeah, I think one of the main reasons to do blockchain is the collaborative environment. So like the network effects you can make off of it. Even within the same ecosystem, you can get projects building on top of you. So like Helium has Hopspotty, which is this completely independent organization that just helps with the proliferation of the nodes. So you can have that kind of like intra-network decentralization, but you can also have Helium help interact with an AR game that does some level of geolocation data, and so then you can create it. That's where you really start getting these network effects, but that takes time. I mean, that is just a lot of boots on the ground unlocking of each of those steps, where each of those sides see the business case, and that can just be a challenge, because everybody is just trying to chug along, and at its core it's deep tech. So I think that's one of the things as a if you're whatever product you're a part of, is understand how to focus, but also have this wider vision of collaborating with whatever ecosystem you're in. Yeah, I think that's
yeah, and that really sums it up really good, because at the end of the day you need different modules, right? Whether it's your community, the security, things that have already been built. We don't have to build from scratch. We have amazing people already building the infra, so we can actually just onboard and create this modular infrastructure for anybody to be able to deploy, right? And this is very exciting. And based on this, how do you think this modular infrastructure and the decentralization could actually affect the whole, let's say, the world economy, the world structure as we see it right now? How can DePIN actually make an impact in the world? I'll start here with you, Matt. What do you think?
I mean, more and more I've it's pretty broad, like what we're trying to do, and the more I've dove into like payments, like traditional payments and finance and stuff, it is archaic. There is just so much stuff in the way, and there's people are still using fax machines and central part of our infrastructure and wire transfers and stuff. Like it's wild to just see kind of what we're up against. I think there's a bit of stigma just because of the overly speculative nature of a lot of what blockchain has been up to this point. I think DePIN definitely represents at least the potential for a very just non-speculative, consumer, functional providing application layer. And I just think it's like really chipping away at that. Like our competition has a lot. We can easily find 10x solutions up against it, and so it's just about like chugging through those.
I have so many little micro examples of how things are broken today. Totally agree with you. So I'm just going to give a couple. One is I got here, used the Grab app for the first time in Singapore, and I was trying to pay with, it's not specifically DePIN, but it shows how things are broken. I was trying to pay with my Visa card, with my MasterCard, with PayPal. Tried to preload into Pay Now, and none of that was working. I didn't have cash. Finally, it said pay with ETH, and I was like, I can do that. So I paid for my first ride share here with ETH, And that was so easy compared to, I'd gone through all of those others. So
no foreign exchange fees, yay.
Yeah, no foreign exchange fees too. So the world is broken, and I will say that in North America, where I am, it's much worse than here. I could never pay with ETH on Uber. And then another example is right now my daughter's trying to buy her first car while I'm here, and it's so difficult to transfer money, especially if you're remote. You have to go into the bank and get, anyway. So a lot of things are broken in our world today, and I like what you said, Matt, about the fact that DePIN, I would rephrase it and say that DePIN is a hard fact. It's very hard to say this is speculative because it's like infrastructure, and it's there, it's built, it's hardware. So I think it can bring some credibility to our industry and maybe usher in the next stage of blockchain.
Yeah, for me, when Streamr started, we talked a lot about smart cities, and that was 7 or so years ago. And smart cities, if you hadn't noticed, never happened. And I think, like looking backwards, we can kind of think why. Like we left it to the governments, and the governments are so slow and slow bureaucratic. But what's really interesting now with DePIN is that these cities are starting to become DePIN cities. So it's coming from the ground up. And so instead of smart cities, I think we're going to see DePIN cities, and it's going to be powered by the people, and we're going to have control over our data and the infrastructure, and it's going to be the original vision, just done even better, actually. So, yeah.
Yeah, what I'm excited about with DePIN is that the modularity and the transparency of a DePIN ecosystem allows the society to route around any inefficiencies. So if you have, option would be one of such inefficiencies, right? But there could be middlemen that are adding cost, adding complexity to any system, and with DePIN we can uncover that and route around it. So say you have a DePIN energy network, and you see that, okay, this middleman is too expensive. Well, any other person can come in there and offer a cheaper service for that same middleman service, for example. And yeah, I think that can really empower us in the future to reduce the waste that we have.
Yeah, and I think we're basing also touching on how the modules, even an infrastructure model, but even on a DePIN level. You all mentioned, governments and really hard to scale, right? Scalability is a big issue. Not one single entity can actually hold the infrastructure. The world is moving very fast, right? And nobody's keeping up with that. DePIN kind of comes and solve it. But there's this issue too of how does DePIN also scale and move forward faster, right? Do you think modularity actually helps here? Or what do you think should be the key points that we should focus on for this scalability so that we don't get stuck like the traditional infrastructure systems and this continues to grow? I'll start with you, Lisa. What do you think?
How can we not get stuck?
Yeah. Scalability. How do we scale, right? How do we use modularity to scale?
Well, the network effect is really the critical factor in scaling. And I mean, I've been working on it for 8 years. How do we lower the friction? How do we raise the confidence level that allows people to come in and start that network effect? And I really I've been saying the same thing for years, but I still think it's about user experience. In the crypto industry, we're small enough that we all want to do things the crypto way because it's cool and we're cool, but it doesn't invite a larger population in. It's kind of a barrier. And I've taught a lot of people how to open a wallet and move crypto around, but it's like one-to-one, until we reach that place where we don't need to explain one-to-one how to do things, and it becomes very easy for people to onboard. I just don't think we're going to be able to scale very quickly and reach that network effect benefit.
How about Matthew? I see you nodding. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that the big Web 2 players, they have a very strong advantage by keeping everything in their own ecosystem. They want to play the big platform game. They want to be able to do everything and offer everything. And we come along with our kind of modular approach, and one infrastructure project provides one thing, one infrastructure provides another thing, and we haven't yet kind of worked figured out that we should all work together to kind of overcome the big centralized players. So my mental model is we're working in this Web3 Legoland where we can all kind of compose and work together, and the sum of all parts will be much stronger than the single monopolies. So this is our kind of path forward to win.
Which is kind of what we're trying to do. I think we're all collaborating here, right? We're trying to bridge that gap, like you said. We need to figure out how to work together. And I saw Ørjan having also like really good thoughts. What were you thinking about this?
Yeah, I was looking behind me to find your name so I can say, yeah, I would second what you said, Matthew. And it's all about cooperation. I mentioned it in my first point that DePIN can utilize existing infrastructure and existing resources and allow that to massively scale horizontally. And I think that is the key here, is to make sure that we utilize the same network of resources, and that can allow us to smoothen out like times where it's a high congestion on a network, or there could be times when there's more need for GPU power and in one network, and that might not coincide with when another network is seeing a high use of GPU power. So if we can have a way for our providers to connect and use the resources for multiple protocols, I think that would be the key to scale horizontally.
Definitely, and taking advantage of the fact that you're talking this point, how do you think the graph is actually like supporting the scalability, specifically your project? What are you guys doing for this?
So specifically for scalability, we do allow people to have very easy access to all the data they need from different protocols. Whether you build on Solana or on Ethereum, you have access to that data, and we do very exciting research into verifiability as well, so that we can use that data for on-chain transactions. It's already economic guarantees for the data, so you can already make some decisions based on the data, and I think that is very exciting to make sure that we can have like a smooth interoperability. So.
One thing I love about the graph is that you have a standardized interface for all of the different data sets.
Yep.
That's not something that people have done very much, and if you use the graph, just to plug it, then you can have one query that works on all the different data sets, and you can plug that into your own application without worrying that you've got to specialize for each chain.
Which is the beauty about modularity, right? It makes it easier for anyone. And Matt, coming from Solana, like having all this, well, let's face it, Solana has a lot of tools in that sense. How do you view like this modularity and incorporating all these tools? How can Solana developers really take advantage of everything of this modularity DePIN infrastructure?
Maybe like a high-level thing that we talk about in the Solana ecosystem is decentralization isn't about the absence of leaders, it's the abundance of them. So, and that's kind of maybe placing it against something like centralized solution like Google Maps or something. And I think something like, I don't know, some astronomical percentage of our movement data of individual movements around the world is just controlled by one company, and thus like 50 PMs, product managers, that basically control how that data is used. And the DePIN promise is that we can actually, if we open that up a little bit, partly the data, partly the infrastructure, partly the possible collaborations, then you have any number of entrepreneurs that are able to build on top of that, and that's what's competitive. It takes us really, as we're talking about here, working together and forming your own modules, finding your own, gaps that your application or whatever you can fill, but it also takes a lot of focus. So I think that's like the tug and pull here, is that each individual project needs to find product market fit and needs to not try to do everything all at once. Reuse parts of your stack, parts of other stacks, be collaborative where you can, and that's like that. How the modules start naturally forming is if each individual project can really fine tune on their place.
I just wanted to add a point to that, because it's great if everyone has access to it, but that also can bring in a problem. If you don't have any if you don't have any data protection, now everybody knows your movements and anybody can figure out where you are, which is not good. So that's what Secret Network is building, the ability to selectively share.
I don't need, to be clear, I don't mean that like literally all of our information about our entire life should be open. What I'm saying is like, but the the transparency on how I would use that data is the difference. Like in Google, it's like literally everything's just cut off except for the API that they choose to bring to me. Whereas like you can have stuff that is confidential in blockchain too, but then you just know how, as the application developer, how you are going to interface with that, and I don't have to form some special business relationship and find a bunch of paperwork and stuff. I can just kind of do that on my own entrepreneurial spirit. I think that's the difference I'm getting at. Not that everything should be 100% open.
Public documentation. But Lisa, you touched base on a really good point, and I feel it's something that still people are not really touching base, but starting to, which is privacy in DePIN. So how can you guys support this? What do you think it's needed in this new growth of DePIN as we've seen it now?
Yeah, and we're really trying to create, that's what our mission is to create the layer 2 for every chain, so that wherever you're building, you have the ability to selectively choose what to share and what not to share. You don't have to have everything be open and transparent. So as we see DePIN grow, what we're building is for Secret to be integrated into all of that growth and all of that building, so that there's the ability to shield information that should not be shared, essentially. It's not to make everything private, but it's to choose who can see what. And just to give the application developers, like you said, the ability they can consume the data, but do they share all of that out? It does put the responsibility squarely on the shoulders of the application developer, but it allows them to access that information and then to use it in a way that doesn't expose people to danger and
which is great, because you're asking people to deploy devices in their homes with their personal information. So it's great to also keep this into account. And yeah, thinking about all device, obviously device data is running a lot, right? It's too much data coming in from devices. So I think this is where kind of Streamr could really help. What do you think Streamr brings for DePIN projects to actually manage all this data and actually stream it in a more efficient way?
Yeah, it's great to hear that data is a big part of this conversation in DePIN. And Streamr really solves that first mile of data transport for these DePIN projects. So DePIN projects have a lot of data that their devices on the edge devices are emitting, and they need to kind of go wherever they need to go, to other servers or to other consumers, wherever it needs to be. So Streamr kind of integrates into the devices and applications. And as a side note, when you integrate Streamr, it's like a decentralization magic wand. So instead of a pipeline up to AWS where you're just pushing the data into a centralized repository, instead all the devices of the DePIN are now interconnected in a decentralized peer-to-peer mesh, and they are free to choose who sees the data and broadcast open data if they choose, or to end-to-end encrypt any kind of sensitive data that they want. So this is data that is different to the data that you put on chain, so different to Secret and whatnot. This is off-chain, but it's pushing a lot of data that probably doesn't belong on the blockchain. But we still want to work with blockchains to manage the access control, the incentivization, and lots of things that the blockchain does well. But for Streamr's side of things, we enable DePINs to stream very high amounts of data off-chain to where it needs to go in a decentralized way.
Amazing, amazing. And I love how we're all talking about modularity, right? We all have our specific thing. And it's part of what at IoTeX we're trying to build with 2.0, right? We're trying to get all these parts together so that people can easily onboard and deploy any DePIN project. So based on this, we're finally getting together, as Matt said. We were working kind of separately. We're finally getting together, but finally people are using this modularity to deploy very interesting, cool new use cases. So what are the most interesting use cases that you have seen come up in the latest months? I'll start with you, Matt, for DePIN.
Wow. Well, I mean, gosh, I think people are really starting to go think from base principles. Where does having granular grassroots, like where does that really make sense? People are doing solar energy on individual houses. You already have marketplaces for that, but now you can kind of accelerate that with DePIN. You can start doing, very hyper-local things. There's always like the blockchains have always been really good at incentivizing infrastructure. Bitcoin basically is that, and I think it's really interesting to see these things that are kind of collaborative, where you can start doing geolocation next to data capture, so you can kind of do the certification right next to it, and maybe next to that is solar generation, and I think that kind of network effect is the thing that I find especially interesting, where you can start like adding more and more tools, where the goal now is to make it look externally like it's like one cohesive application that gives me all of the hyper-local information and energy and whatever else I need from that area. And I think that is like the exciting future that we're pretty close to.
Anyone else have an interesting?
Yeah, I think the most interesting, and secret is confidential computing, right? So we have decentralized confidential computing, DCC, which overlaps with DePIN because we're using the SGX secure enclave. But what I think is the most interesting use case coming up in the next few years is confidential AI, because right now you cannot there's a lot of problems with LLMs in that the data you use to train it is now publicly consumable or discoverable. The prompts that people use to get information out, answers out, are not very protected. So confidential AI is a huge need if we're going to see AI become used in the world in general. We need to have some sort of infrastructure that supports the ability to protect the inputs and the outputs, essentially. So confidential AI, I think, is the most interesting. And then people keep asking me, for some reason, to do some kind of confidential end-to-end chat application with secret. And I'm like, there's Signal, but I guess Signal is not decentralized, and it's not confidential, so Telegram is not confidential, so I guess there's a need for it. But again, network effect is a huge barrier to doing any kind of chat application. So those are the two.
Yeah, for me, the interconnection of DePINs is something really interesting. So Demo is an application car mobility DePIN, and they have roaming devices, and those devices can actually verify the Helium network and see that their edge nodes are doing what they are supposed to do. So DePINs verifying other DePINs, I think, is really interesting.
Yeah, I think the AI boom have impacted the graph a lot more than what people might realize. How many projects that are now creating their own AI applications on top of the graph, and being able to get a natural language model to explain the data while also giving links to the actual data itself and showing, okay, this is coming from this network on this block and these transactions. I think that is very powerful, and it allows us to take back control over a lot of decentralized AI projects that are very popular, and being able to trace that back and show, okay, this is the on-chain data that is underlying these claims is very exciting. So,
especially when we have so much data coming from devices, then you can build AI models on top of it, right? Yeah. But then it comes the question of security and privacy and all that. So yeah, I guess it's going to be very interesting what we're starting to build. And how do you guys see the future of DePIN, and how do you think we should foster more collaborations? Where should we go from here? I'll open it for anybody who wants to respond first.
So I think going back to what I mentioned earlier was the being able to collaborate across protocols. I think that is very important. So we can not only use the same resources that providers are providing, but also the shared research and development efforts, for example. That's what we do with my other hat, with the InfraDAO hat that I'm the founder of. We are focusing on interoperability and having a more unified approach to research and development. So
I was going to say the same thing, is working together, collaboration, abandoning competition in some cases for the sake of collaboration. Our DCC movement has around 25 companies that are all involved in confidential computing. Some of us are direct competitors, and yet we're working together to move the narrative and the industry forward, and that's what's needed.
Which is kind of what you can say also about Solana and IoTeX. At first, people would say that, but now you see us collaborating, which is really exciting. And also with all of our projects, right? At some point, people could say we're competitors, but here we are working to build something together, right? Yeah, Matt, do you have any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just laser focused on helping applications get product market fit. You know, there's some pretty good signs out there. You know, multi-sided marketplaces are always a little bit tricky, but I mean, you're really starting to see not just the supply side that is incentivized, but also the demand side from people just fundamentally wanting to use whatever that is, services, the data, whatever that they're using. And I think that laser focus and the iterative mindset of I need to solve this user problem, hell or high water, I think is the thing that we really need to be focused on as an industry. And then iterating towards, certainly like share notes and iterating with each other to make those applications even more powerful.
Matthew, would you like to share something?
I think maybe, just to echo what everybody said, but also leaning in with an example that Streamr is bringing over its network to IoTeX, actually. And the proposal was just approved by our community. So, it's an example of infrastructure working with infrastructure to have that, to make it so that applications don't have to, think too much about the infrastructure choices. They don't have to choose ecosystems. Everybody should be able to work together and provide the best chance for success for the applications.
Exactly, which is why we are also deploying in the graph and then building our bridge to Solana. And then soon we're probably going to be doing something with Secret Network. So we're very excited about that. Let me finish with a quick question, maybe a little bit controversial, but who do you think we should not collaborate with? And I'll open the floor for anybody who's brave enough to answer this. Is there some type of project or type of people that you believe shouldn't be part of this modularity, let's say?
Well, I mean, in some sense, since we wouldn't be able to stop. I mean, I think that's actually one of the misnomers. People ask me all the time, like, what's Solana concentrating on, or like, what's your focus? And which I have like a focus of generally like enablement, but there's nothing I can do to curate. There's nothing I can do. I think there's that, and that's like a beauty. Like, there's certainly things happened on Solana that I'm not excited about, but I think the hope is like there's a little bit of like hope in humanity, I guess, if you get really down to the core of it. Like what are humans going to want to consume and create and create an ecosystem and an economy around. And so I think people that are like together in that at this early stage, I think those are the people that like, because there is some pretty heinous stuff that happened on Solana like a little while ago, and the community kind of like self-governed and would just hide stuff from UIs or whatever they wanted to do. And I think that's the thing that we should think about as communities, like who we are, and there's no one entity that really decides that. It really is kind of like this amorphous thing that kind of figures that out live. So people who are kind of, I think there's a little bit of, vibes and other influence that I think each of us can make sure that we're doing as we go.
There are projects that I won't work with, and it's a pretty clear line. If you have a legal opinion, I mean, we're doing confidential computing, so that's very easily translatable to nefarious activities. So I won't support projects building on secret if they don't have some sort of evidence that they're trying to be compliant. It's just, I don't want to end up in jail, So, so that's the line for me. Is if you demonstrate that you're working towards being compliant and working with the systems, then I'll work with you.
You want to be able to go to France.
Yes.
Just quickly, any application that's not really playing a long game, I think, and they're pretty easy to spot. The ones that are just hell-bent on speculation of the token, they should be avoided just because of, there's so much to do, and so we don't really need to waste our time on helping those projects that are clearly malaligned to the end mission of Web3.
Yeah, I think while there's a lot of that I wouldn't actively go into a partnership with, I think a lot of the benefits of a Web3 protocol is that many of the unwanteds are filtered out just by the virtue of clearing out all of these inefficiencies. If it's a corrupt system that tries to provide a data service on the graph, for example, and they have a too high cost, or they have not some other features that makes it so that they're unwanted, it will be filtered out by the system and the economics themselves. So at least like in my ideal Web3 world, like we don't actively choose who to work with or who not to work with. I think the transparency and user agency will allow us to filter around those and not use them. So
I appreciate you guys taking this question. I know it was of the well, but yeah, that's why we're happy at IoTeX to be collaborating with the top projects, and we also vet the good ones, because one of the good things about modularity is that you have to have a good module, right? If you connect a bad module to a good module, you can make that good module go bad, right? So that's what we're trying to avoid. So that's why we're happy to be collaborating with everybody here on stage. I want to thank you guys for your time, and I want to thank you, audience, for being here. So yeah, I will see you next time. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.